The weapons bay smelled of gun oil and dust, the air thick with the hum of fluorescent lights. Hoa Karen crouched low over the massive Barrett .50, her hands steady as she worked the cleaning cloth along the bolt. She moved like someone who had done this 1,000 times, each motion precise, reverent. To the soldiers lounging nearby, though, she was invisible, just another temporary technician with dark hair pulled loose and a uniform faded from too many washes. Eddie, the sharp-jawed sniper who thrived on swagger, spotted her and smirked. "You clean well, Karen?" he called out, his voice bouncing off the concrete walls. "How about hitting a target at 3,800 meters?" His buddies laughed, the kind of laughter meant to cut. One of them shoved a rifle into her hands, as if tossing a toy to a child. Karen didn't answer. Her silence stretched, sharp as a blade. She walked to the firing line, boots echoing against the floor. The target was barely a speck on the horizon, wavering in the heat. She set the rifle down, adjusted the scope with small, sure clicks, and lowered her cheek against the stock. The laughter behind her still rippled, but she no longer heard it. All she heard was the wind. Her finger brushed the trigger, calm as breath. A crack split the air, the rifle's recoil shuddering through her frame. Seconds dragged long, then the distant target erupted in dust and splinters. The bay went silent. Eddie's grin died on his face. A commander at the back muttered coldly, "Who authorized someone like her to be here?" Another voice answered, lower, sharper, "No one." Karen stood, snapped her cleaning kit shut with a click that echoed louder than the shot. She didn't look at them, didn't explain. She just walked past, her boots striking the floor with measured rhythm, each step saying what words never could. For the soldiers, she was supposed to be nobody, just a girl with rags and oil. But the impossible bullet now hung in the air, undeniable, a ghost over their pride. And in that silence, they realized she wasn't here to prove herself. She was here to remind them how small they truly were. The next morning, the armory felt colder, not in temperature, but in the way eyes followed Hoa Karen wherever she moved. She bent over another rifle, her hands slow and deliberate, wiping carbon from the barrel. Every scrape of the cloth seemed louder in the hush. Every breath a reminder that she wasn't supposed to belong here. Private Malone, wiry with a buzz cut that gleamed under the lights, leaned against the table and raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Careful, princess," he sneered. "That gun weighs more than you do." His words drew laughter, sharp and ugly, bouncing across the concrete. Private Hayes, his neck burned raw from the sun, added, "This is a sniper base, not a daycare. Someone get her a dollhouse." The laughter swelled again. They wanted her to flinch, to show weakness. Karen never looked up. Her silence wrapped around her like armor. She polished the rifle stock, checked the chamber, stacked the weapon neatly, and reached for the next one. Her restraint gnawed at them more than any insult could have. Then came Corporal Vance, polished boots clicking, grin wide but hollow. He leaned too close, his cologne suffocating the air. "You're wasting your time, little lady," he murmured, voice dripping false charm. "Why don't you fold uniforms instead of pretending to know guns?" He flicked a rag to the floor, daring her. Karen bent, picked up the rag, folded it with precise corners, and laid it gently back on the table. Then her eyes lifted, locking onto Vance's, calm, unblinking. "If it's so easy," she said softly, "show me." The room went quiet. The rag remained untouched by his hand. His grin faltered, the mask slipping just enough to expose the coward underneath. Karen turned back to her work, shutting him out as cleanly as she shut a rifle case. Behind the cracked door of the storage bay, Captain Seth watched in silence. His scarred hands tightened around a forgotten clipboard as his eyes lingered on her movements. She wasn't posturing. She wasn't fighting for attention. She was surviving in silence, moving with a certainty that rattled louder than any insult. And Seth, for the first time, began to wonder, who exactly was Hoa Karen? By noon, the soldiers had invented a new game. They called it inspection, but it was nothing more than another excuse to break her. One by one, they shoved rifles into Hoa Karen's arms, an M4, a Scar H, a Barrett so heavy that two of them grunted just lifting it onto the table. "Let's see if the princess can keep up," Malone jeered, tossing her a rifle like it was a toy. Hayes, ever the brute, accidentally let one slip so it crashed onto her boot with a loud clang. The others laughed, waiting for her to stumble, to curse, to finally crack. She didn't. Karen bent, picked it up, set it back on the table, and kept cleaning. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm. The laughter stumbled, faltered, but didn't stop. She stacked the rifles neatly when she finished, her movements deliberate, as though their cruelty had no weight at all. And then she walked away, leaving their noise behind like smoke. But in the quiet of the weapons bay, when no one thought to watch, her work spoke differently. She didn't just clean, she calibrated. She studied barrels under the harsh light, tilted them to catch minute flaws invisible to the naked eye. With a pencil, she sketched tiny corrections in a battered notebook. Drift angles, wind coefficients, scope reticles redrawn by hand. Captain Seth saw it all. Hidden in the shadows, he slipped a digital measuring tool across the same barrel she had just marked. The numbers blinked on the screen, off by barely 0.01 millimeters. His breath caught. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. She knew these rifles better than most snipers ever would. The next day, during another inspection, Vance tried again, strutting with false confidence. He shoved a rifle across the table. "Go on, tech girl," he sneered. "Show us how you pamper this one." The group chuckled, waiting. Karen lifted the weapon, but instead of cleaning, she adjusted the scope, twisting the dial with deliberate clicks. Her eyes narrowed, the calculation unfolding silently across her expression. She set the rifle back down, then stepped aside. "Try it," she said simply. Eddie, drawn in by the challenge, grabbed it and fired at the range. The shot cracked through the still air dead center. The group fell silent, their smirks wilting into something more uneasy. Eddie lowered the rifle slowly, his square jaw tightening. Karen didn't wait for their words. She returned to her bench, opened her kit, and kept working, her silence louder than their disbelief. Seth, still watching from the shadows, felt the weight of truth settling heavy in his chest. This wasn't a technician pretending to belong. This was something else entirely steel wrapped in silence, a history written in equations and scars. And as the whispers among the soldiers turned sharp with unease, Seth realized one thing. Sooner or later, the truth about Hoa Karen would no longer stay hidden. By the end of the week, Hoa Karen's name had become a weapon in itself. Whispers carried through the mess hall, across the firing range, and into the barracks at night. She cheated. Hayes hissed over his tray, stabbing a fork into rubbery eggs. Nobody hits 3,800 meters clean. She must have rigged the scope. Or maybe someone fired for her, Malone added, leaning back with a smug grin. The girl's nothing but a cleaner. The others laughed, but their laughter no longer rang with conviction. It was edged with unease, as if they were mocking her to quiet their own doubt. When Karen walked past carrying a crate of ammo, Eddie called out, his voice loud enough for everyone. "Hey, gun cleaner, that shot the other day fluke, right? Why don't you prove it again?" His buddies roared with cruel laughter, pounding the tables. She didn't turn. She set the crate down at the range, her movements calm, almost indifferent. Yet their voices followed her like gnats, needling, daring. That afternoon, under the blazing sun, Eddie pressed further. He dragged a rifle and tripod out to the firing line and gestured at the distant target shimmering on the horizon. "Let's see it again, Karen. Or are you afraid the truth will show?" The crowd gathered, their smirks sharp. Lieutenant Greer, tall, severe, and feared by many, strode over with a clipboard. She scanned Karen's faded uniform, her lip curling. "This isn't a playground," she snapped. "Step aside. Real snipers are waiting." Snickers rose from the group, but Karen did not move. Her hands stayed on the rifle. She adjusted the scope, fingers making soft, exact clicks. Her voice came low, steady. "I'm not done." Greer's eyes narrowed. For a tense moment, it seemed she might drag Karen away. But Karen had already lowered her cheek to the stock, her focus unbroken. The wind was stronger that day, flags whipping at half-mast, dust swirling around their boots. Karen breathed slowly, deeply, as though drawing in the entire base with her. The rifle cracked, the recoil slamming into her shoulder. 5 long seconds later, The target 3,800 meters out erupted dead center, splinters scattering into the air. The silence that followed was absolute. The soldiers who had jeered now stood frozen, their laughter caught in their throats. Eddie's smirk slid from his face, replaced by something he'd never admit was fear. Greer's clipboard lowered an inch, her jaw clenched. Karen stood, wiping her hands calmly on her uniform. She closed the case with a soft click and walked away. Not a word, not a glance. The group didn't follow. They didn't dare. For the first time, they realized the truth was heavier than their arrogance. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was warning. Captain Seth couldn't shake it anymore. The way Hoa Karen handled rifles, the way she turned humiliation into silence and silence into dominance, it wasn't random. It was muscle memory. It was history. Late one evening, when the barracks had quieted and only the hum of generators filled the air, Seth sat in the archive room. Dust clung to the rows of forgotten files, pages yellowed by years of neglect. He combed through weapons logs, unsure what he was searching for, until his eyes landed on a line written in neat, slanted handwriting, HK recalibrated balance system. 4-degree drift corrected. The note was dated 5 years back, tied to a prototype XM2010, a weapon most soldiers never even touched. Seth's heart thudded. HK no technician should have had clearance to alter that weapon, let alone leave behind flawless corrections. The next morning, he marched to the colonel's office with the log under his arm. Colonel Vaughn sat behind his desk, his face weathered like stone, silver mustache sharp against the harsh light. Seth laid the open book in front of him. "Sir," Seth said, his voice tight, "this technician, she's not just a temp. Look." The colonel studied the page, his eyes narrowing slightly before drifting back up to Seth. Silence stretched between them until Vaughn finally exhaled, long and weary. He slid a manila folder across the desk. "You weren't supposed to find this." On the tab, stenciled in bold letters, Project Viper, Eco. Seth's pulse hammered as he opened it. Inside were reports stamped, classified, operational logs, ballistic charts, mission maps, and in the center of it all, a name. Hoa Karen. Not as technician, not as recruit, but as lead sniper trainer, Delta Force. Seth's throat went dry. He flipped faster. Photographs of a desert range, a younger Karen with cropped hair, standing in front of hardened snipers, guiding them with hand signals, her notes scrawled across a whiteboard filled with wind calculations. Another photo, grainy, darker, showed the aftermath of a mission in North Pakistan. Black smoke, twisted metal, a casualty list. Entire team. Kaya. Except her. "She survived," Seth whispered. The colonel's voice was gravel, low and final. "She did. Her entire team did not. She carried that rifle back alone. She asked for her file to be erased. We honored that." Seth stared down at the folder, the weight of it pressing into his chest. It explained the silence. It explained why she endured the mockery without striking back. She wasn't here to prove herself. She was here because ghosts wouldn't let her rest. "No one here outranks her enough to judge," Vaughn added, closing the folder with a sharp snap. "Keep watching, but do not interfere." Seth nodded, but his gut churned. As he walked out, he pictured her at the range, dark hair falling loose as she cleaned a rifle with surgeon's care. To the others, she was just a girl with rags and oil. To him now, she was something else entirely, steel forged in fire, walking in silence, carrying the weight of the dead. The mood on base shifted, though no one dared admit it. The story of Hoa Karen's impossible shots spread like wildfire. But it wasn't admiration that carried it at first. It was suspicion, envy, fear. And yet, piece by piece, the tide began to turn. It started with the recruits. One afternoon, a skinny kid named Diaz approached her, clutching a rifle that jammed every third round. His voice trembled, his stutter worse under the stares of other soldiers. "Ma'am, it keeps failing." The crowd expected Karen to wave him off, to mock him like the others did. Instead, she took the weapon gently, her hands moving with surgical precision. Within seconds, she had the rifle stripped down, the parts laid out like an anatomy lesson on a cloth. She pointed to a warped spring, replaced it with a spare from her kit, and reassembled the weapon in fluid, unbroken motion. Then she handed it back. "Watch the wind," she said simply. Diaz fired perfect shot, dead center. His eyes widened, shoulders straightening with a pride no one had seen before. For the first time, recruits looked at her not with mockery, but awe. The whispers grew different after that. The laughter aimed at Karen began to stumble, to hesitate. Even the boldest of her tormentors faltered when they saw how the recruits now carried their rifles with reverence after her touch. Malone stopped joking so loudly. Hayes kept his distance. Vance's grin slipped more often than it held. But it was Eddie whose shift was most visible. Once the loudest in the pack, he now cleaned his weapon in silence, his hands trembling slightly. One evening he found her in the weapons depot, alone, checking the zero on a scope. He didn't smirk, didn't sneer. Instead, he knelt, setting his gloves down beside her. "I didn't know," he whispered, eyes low. "I'm not worthy to touch the rifle you've cleaned." Karen paused, her fingers still on the adjustment dial. She looked at him, not cruelly, not even triumphantly, simply steady. "Don't apologize to me," she said quietly. "Respect the weapon in front of you." Then she turned, her boots soft on the floor, leaving him kneeling there. Word of moments like that spread faster than any rumor. Soon, soldiers who had once laughed began to lower their eyes when she passed. Some muttered apologies, others avoided her entirely. It didn't matter to her. She never sought their approval. But the respect began to settle, heavy and undeniable. No longer forced, no longer feigned. It wasn't won by shouting or by authority pinned to her chest. It was carved slowly, quietly, in every motion of her hands, in every perfect shot, in every silence she refused to break. Hoa Karen didn't demand respect. She embodied it. And the base was finally starting to understand. Orders came down from command like thunder rolling across a valley, clear, final, irreversible. Hoa Karen was officially appointed Director of Tactical Engineering and Long-Range Sniper Training. The news swept through the base in a whisper that turned into a hush. The men who had once laughed now found their throats dry, their jokes brittle. On her first morning with the title, she entered the briefing room exactly as she always had, faded uniform, hair tied loosely back, boots scuffed from work. No medals, no theatrics. The officers were already standing when she stepped inside, not because protocol demanded it, but because something in them refused to remain seated. Karen walked to the head of the table, set a single brass bullet on the polished wood, its casing catching the light. Her voice, when it came, was calm, unshaken. "We're starting from zero. Don't forget I'm only 23. No one dared answer. The silence that followed was not disbelief anymore. It was respect. Her leadership did not arrive with shouting, nor with the heavy slam of fists on tables. It came in the way she moved across the range, boots crunching on gravel, eyes sharp but steady. She demonstrated shots instead of lecturing. She whispered corrections instead of barking orders. 2 mils left. Breathe with the shot, not against it. The recruits listened, rapt, their pencils scratching furiously in notebooks. Each time her bullet split a target, their awe deepened. Veterans began to copy her methods. Even hardened officers found themselves quoting her adjustments. Yet Karen never raised her voice, never demanded authority. She let results speak where words would have failed. Still, the weight of command carried consequences. Malone disappeared quietly. His bunk cleared overnight. No explanations offered. Hayes lost his sponsorship to a special ops program. Whispers said the decision came from somewhere above, but everyone knew whose shadow it traced back to. Eddie, once the loudest of her tormentors, found a grainy video of his past insults circling through military forums. His reputation collapsed into silence. Karen did not celebrate these outcomes. She did not gloat. She carried herself the same as always, focused on the rifles, the recruits, the work. But the message was clear. The era of mockery was over. In the evenings, when the drills ended and the sun dipped low, she remained at the range, checking weapons with the same reverence she had when no one believed in her. Soldiers would pass at a distance, glancing toward her with something almost like reverence. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Without medals, without a crown, without raising her voice, Hoa Karen had become what the base needed most. A leader carved, not by authority given, but by respect earned. Night fell heavy over the base, but sleep never came easily for Hoa Karen. She sat alone in the armory, a single lamp throwing sharp light across the steel of a dismantled rifle. Her hands moved automatically, cleaning, calibrating, assembling, but her eyes were far away. A faded photograph slipped from her pocket as she leaned forward. She caught it with trembling fingers. The picture showed 6 soldiers, her old team, smiling in desert sun, sand caked on their boots, rifles slung across their shoulders. She was there too, younger, hair cropped short, standing with arms crossed and a rare smile on her lips. The memories pulled her back, harsh and unrelenting. Years earlier, in the blistering deserts of North Pakistan, she had stood before Delta Force snipers. Her voice then had not been soft, but sharp, commanding. Wind at 8 mils left, adjust. Again. Bullets cracked through the air, closer with every correction she barked. Her team had trusted her math, her instincts, her calm in the storm. She was their anchor. Then came the mission that broke them. Operation Viper Echo. The details were burned into her mind, black smoke on the horizon, radios shrieking, the sudden storm of gunfire from ridgelines they thought were clear. Chaos swallowed them whole. She remembered the blood, the screaming, the way her own breath had felt like broken glass as she dragged herself through the dust. One by one, the call signs went silent, until only hers remained. She carried her rifle back alone, hands raw, eyes empty. Behind her, the desert was a graveyard of friends who never got to fire their last shots. When she reached the forward outpost, she asked for one thing: to have her file erased, to vanish into anonymity. She no longer wanted the name sniper trainer, nor the weight of command. She wanted silence, as if erasing her name could erase the guilt. But guilt doesn't fade. It lingers like the smell of smoke and hair, like sand in boots that no amount of washing can remove. Back in the present, Karen brushed her thumb across the photograph. For the first time in weeks, her eyes softened, wet at the edges. She closed them, inhaled once, then hardened again. She tucked the photo carefully back into her pocket, like a secret too fragile for the world. She slung the rifle over her shoulder, stood, and walked out of the armory. The night air was cool, carrying the distant echo of recruits laughing, oblivious. Karen's boots struck the gravel with quiet rhythm. To the base, she was the unshakable director, the silent legend. But inside, the ghosts of the desert still marched with her, every step a reminder of what she had lost and why she could never allow herself to fail again. The change didn't happen overnight, but it was undeniable. The base that once buzzed with jeers and mockery began to hum with discipline. The shift had a name: Hoa Karen. Recruits who once scoffed at her now arrived early for drills, notebooks open, pencils sharpened. They crowded close at the range, watching every flick of her wrist as she adjusted scopes, every calm breath before she fired. She didn't waste words. A single correction, 2 mils left, or ease your trigger squeeze, landed with more force than any shouted lecture. One boy, Private Lee, who weeks earlier had been marked for dismissal, now stood taller, his shots cleaner. Karen had spent only a few quiet minutes with him, reshaping his stance, whispering, "Breathe with the rifle, not against it." His targets told the story better than he ever could. The officers who'd nearly cut him reversed their decision without a word. Among the recruits, that moment became legend. Veterans noticed too. Even those hardened by years of combat began imitating her methods. At first, they pretended it was coincidence, but soon it became habit, mirroring her calm, repeating her calculations. The range, once filled with arrogance, now echoed with respect. Her silence no longer made her invisible. It defined her. Soldiers moved aside when she passed, not out of fear, but recognition. They had seen her break targets at distances they thought impossible, fix weapons they believed beyond repair, and stand unflinching under humiliation they themselves couldn't have endured. Malone and Hayes were gone quiet transfers, the kind nobody explained. Eddie remained, but his swagger had vanished. He cleaned his rifle in near reverence, as though still haunted by her words, "Respect the weapon in front of you." At night, the base was different too. The old whispers of "she doesn't belong" were gone, replaced with stories told in low voices, of her shot, her notebooks, her ghost-like calm. Some said she was unbreakable, others swore she was haunted. Both were true. In her silence, Hoa Karen had transformed the base, not with rank pinned to her chest, nor with orders shouted across parade grounds. She had reshaped it the way steel is forged slowly, under pressure, until it becomes unyielding. The sun sank low over the range, painting the sky in deep strokes of amber and violet. Hoa Karen stood at the firing line, a rifle cradled in her arms. She didn't fire. She didn't need to. Around her, the air itself seemed to hold still, heavy with the memory of every bullet she had sent downrange. Behind her, soldiers gathered in silence. Recruits, veterans, officers, the same men who once laughed, mocked, and spat, their disbelief now stood quietly, watching. Not one dared interrupt. They didn't see a temporary technician anymore. They saw the figure who had shattered arrogance with precision, who had endured humiliation without breaking, who had carried ghosts without complaint. Karen lowered the rifle, rested it gently on the bench, and turned. Her boots crunched on gravel as she walked past the crowd. Eyes dropped instinctively, not out of fear, but out of respect carved deeper than any order could demand. A single recruit whispered almost reverently, "The silent shot." The name clung to the air like smoke. In her quarters later that night, Karen sat alone. The photograph of her old team lay on the table, faces smiling in a desert they would never leave. She touched it once, softly, then slid it back into her pocket. The past still lived with her, but it no longer owned her. Here, among recruits and rifles, she had found a new purpose, not to erase her ghosts, but to honor them. The base was hers now, though she had never asked for it. Leadership had come not with medals or raised voices, but with silence. She had proved that respect doesn't always roar it, sometimes whispers, steady and unshakable. And the soldiers who followed her would never forget it. Message, reflection. This story is not only hers, it belongs to everyone who has been underestimated, mocked, or dismissed. To those who have walked into rooms where laughter cut sharper than knives, where your worth was questioned before you even opened your mouth, Hoa Karen's silence was not weakness, it was choice. Every time she refused to respond to cruelty with words, every time she answered arrogance with precision, she was declaring a truth louder than any shout. You don't have to fight noise with noise. The world will doubt you. It will laugh, underestimate, and push you aside. But if you stay steady, if you let your work speak, if you keep walking with quiet certainty, eventually, the laughter will fall silent. And respect, real respect, will rise in its place. For those who carry ghosts, who know the weight of loss, your silence is not emptiness. It is strength, it is memory, it is proof that you are still standing. So take heart. You don't need to scream to be heard. Sometimes the most powerful sound in the world is the sound of your silence.